We have multiple Toronto Raptors updates as the trade reports, rumors have been flying right now for this Raptors squad regarding veterans on this team, including Chris Boucher, as well as Bruce Brown, as teams look to offload salary onto the Toronto Raptors who have been rebuilding and facilitate other bigger trades around the NBA. So we're going to discuss what all of these reports are saying regarding this Raptors team, what teams are interested in Chris Boucher, Bruce Brown, all of these different guys out here on the roster, and what we can expect as trade reports are saying that things are looking imminent right now, especially with the Jimmy Butler situation. So lots of stuff to dive into in this video. But before we dive into that, folks, again, if you guys are part of the 67% of our viewers that haven't hit the subscribe button just yet, make sure you guys hit that sub button so you don't miss a single thing that's going on with this Toronto Raptors team. And of course, we're going to deliver daily Toronto Raptors news coverage as we inch closer and closer to this year's trade deadline. So lots of stuff to dive into. So let's just dive into it because, again, there are a lot of reports dropping. Basically, Josh Lumenberg came out and said that outside of Scottie Barnes, everyone is believed to be available at the right price, though it's hard to see them breaking up their young core, which leaves their small handful of vets on the table. The biggest deal they could reasonably make is trading center Jakob Poeltl, is one that, according to multiple league sources, they've been extremely reluctant to consider. The 29-year-old is having a career year, averaging a personal best 14.6 points, 10.4 rebounds, 61% shooting, and would surely have a market if he were made available. So, of course, it's the first thing that we wanted to sort of discuss, because with the Raptors being linked in a ton of trade rumors, all the latest updates, Jakob Poeltl is a big question because he's like their biggest trade chip if they do desire making a move, making a trade to send him off to another team. But of course, the Raptors don't seem that interested in dealing with Jakob Poeltl, given the impact that he can have out here on this Raptors roster. So basically, don't expect a Jakob Poeltl deal to come through unless we're getting a major haul. Don't expect, RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley, any of these top name guys, Gradey Dick, to be involved in any trades unless we're getting a major haul back. But where we can expect some other moves to be made, some bigger moves happen, is around the vets. And this is where the other reports really come into play regarding this Raptors squad. So basically, according to Matt Moore of Clutch Points and stuff, two teams are interested in Toronto's Chris Boucher, who has been a quiet six-man of the year case, and that's a bold take because he's been in and out of the lineup. But I love the shout-outs there for Chris Boucher, and that's the San Antonio Spurs as well as the Denver Nuggets. Now, the Spurs are ready to upgrade their non-Wemby minutes at center, and Denver desperately needs more rotation players. Now, of course, Chris Boucher is more of a 4, and I think actually he could be a really nice complementary piece out there on the court with Wemby, because if you look at kind of that Spurs roster, the type of guys that they have out there in the lineups, and you see the types of lineups that they're running with, they don't really play Zach Collins and Wemby on the court together really at all. And if you look at other guys like Sohan, and these types of guys, they can use an extra forward. That's a natural kind of secondary rim protector. And frankly, if you could look at the shot blocking of Chris Boucher and Victor Wembanyama out there in the paint, I don't think there's a realistic possibility anyone is scoring within 5 feet of the basket if those two guys are out there on the court. Because even if Wemby is drawn out to the perimeter, Chris Boucher can be that secondary side help for whatever, for that San Antonio Spurs team if things are sort of coming out. So Chris Boucher makes a ton of sense for the San Antonio Spurs. We've already discussed the Denver Nuggets fit, and there's a trade that fits. The Spurs have a ton of draft capital. They have first round picks galore, and they have some interesting contracts. Going into a summer, they probably want to be able to bring in some decent assets, bring in some decent players, given how good the Spurs have been. So essentially, they could deal Zach Collins, who's on a multi-year contract, to the Toronto Raptors for a guy in Chris Boucher, who's putting up some great numbers. 10 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, doing a lot of different stuff, and then attach Zach Collins as well as one of those first-round picks, second-round picks, as well as maybe, and the Raptors also send back a Davion Mitchell to make the money sort of matchup work and give them an extra guard, an extra guy to sort of fit into that roster. So, of course, Chris Boucher is a guy that Raptors fans love, and he's been having an awesome year with the exception of that recent Orlando Magic game, but it's time to sort of make moves in order to acquire, future prospects, future talent, just given the fact that we are trying to capture that flag this season. It's the reality of what's going on with this Raptors squad, right? This team wants to get a top-tier prospect in this year's NBA draft. We're in year one of a rebuild, so it doesn't make a ton of sense to hold on to our vets, for the long term, especially if we're keeping some guys like Jakob Poeltl out there on the lineup. So Chris Boucher, as much as I love him, it's likely going to get dealt ahead of this year's trade deadline, but that leads us to the other guy that's been brought up, and it's Bruce Brown. Of course, there's been a bunch of chatter regarding Jimmy Butler and those whole sweepstakes and everything happening there at this point, but there's a lot of stuff happening on that front. So this is something I forgot to mention out there in yesterday's video, but the Phoenix Suns did make a move to also acquire a ton of first-round picks for the future, essentially facilitating one of these big blockbuster moves in order to acquire Jimmy Butler, send off draft capital to teams like the Toronto Raptors, the Milwaukee Bucks, in order to make one of these deals happen. So the Suns have a lot more tools to really play with in one of these big blockbuster trades that are going on here now at this point, and essentially we're getting more reports that are linking the Toronto Raptors to this whole saga, all this madness that's going on around the NBA. So basically what's coming out right now is Brett Siegel revealed that there are only two scenarios that make sense at this junction. It's the Suns, Heat, Pistons, Bucks, or Suns, Heat, Raptors, Bucks. There isn't a Western Conference team that can or has shown interest in adding Bradley Beal. There's also been some reports about Bradley Beal, willing to take away his trade, no trade clause to Milwaukee Bucks. Then Chris Haynes reported saying that's nonsense, that's craziest, they wouldn't do that. I think that's more of a leverage play. The Suns are kind of really forcing him out here now at this point and stuff too. So basically what's come out and what they're saying regarding the Phoenix Suns and everything that's happening is there are a few different scenarios that exist right now in terms of getting Butler to Phoenix. This trade that the Suns made is the first step in the process that making this happen. Now, comes the hard part and figure out the other teams are getting involved. So, of course, we just saw the Raptors being listed in this batch of groups, in this batch of teams, and it makes a ton of sense why, given the fact that they have so much salary to be able to aggregate in order to make one of these deals go down, make one of these deals actually happen. And Brett Siegel has essentially revealed a trade package or a trade framework that really makes sense in terms of the Toronto Raptors making one of these deals go down. So we'll bring this up here. We'll get this stuff going. So basically, one scenario that two different league sources told Clutch Points about involves Butler going to Phoenix, Milwaukee moving out of the second apron with Pat Connaughton going to Toronto, and then this turns Bruce Brown and Chris Middleton to the Miami Heat, and Bradley Beal Love to Milwaukee, and then Portis and Connaughton to Toronto. Draft picks would obviously be sent the way of the Miami Heat as well as the Toronto Raptors. So that is very, very intriguing in terms of a framework, in terms of a package that, could see the Toronto Raptors are really bring in some interesting pieces in Pat Connaughton and Bobby Portis. Like, these guys, again, don't have the greatest stats, but have been good players out there in the NBA, so their value could be redeemed out there with the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors acquire a bunch of draft capital, obviously moving out of off of expiring contracts and things along those lines, and then basically you slide in there and you get free picks. You get free picks and then future expiring contracts. So that's kind of what the Toronto Raptors want to do, given the fact that they're in a current state where they want to really be in a position to bottom out over the course of the season. So this is the type of move, this is the type of deal that makes sense with everything that aligns with the recent Raptors reporting, the Raptors being willing to go in and get Connaughton, coming from multiple more sources now at this point in terms of what we can expect for a big framework for one of these deals. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about one of these blockbuster trades going down. You guys are the best thing as far as subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.